You're listening to A Seat at the Tech Table, a podcast by Sisters in Tech, hosted by Anna and Esther Kofariji. This podcast highlights the experiences of Black women working and thriving in the tech industry. You'll learn about how they found their paths into tech, and hopefully you'll be inspired to consider whether there's a seat for you at the tech table.
Today's guest is Fadzai Angelina Kazarema, a London-based international user acquisition lead. Let's start the show.
Hi, Ange. Hi, sisters. How's it going?
Good, we're good.
Excited to have you on the show.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get straight into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Okay, so my name is Ange. I work as the user acquisition lead at Headspace.com. I was born in Zimbabwe, where I lived for a few years alongside South Africa, and then moved here to the UK when I was about 11. So I've lived most of my life here now. And yeah, I've just been working within paid media and advertising for a long time. I think that kind of sums me up.
Cool. Okay, well, one of the things that we really try to show people with this podcast is that there isn't one route into tech. Now, you studied marketing at university, and then you studied law, and you did an MBA. We'd love you to tell us a bit about your university experience, and then how you discovered tech at the end of it.
Okay, yeah, cool, awesome. So I think for the longest time throughout education, I always wanted to do advertising and media. It's just one of those jobs that you see in movies that sounds kind of really interesting and artistic, but also numbers and data focused and people oriented. So that was always something that I wanted within my role. So when I went to uni, I was like, oh, I'm going to do marketing. But generally throughout my life, I've always had an affinity for tech in general. My dad had a techie job, like engineering, and my brother was the type of person to disconnect the TV and put it back together again. So I would just kind of really watch him and took a lot from him. I actually took a career break. That's how I ended up studying a bit of law a couple of years back. And it was because the industry was kind of getting really changed by the law of GDPR, and I was interested in law. And I thought it would be a great kind of way to marry these two interests. I already had the tech background, I could learn a little bit more about law, and I could find a way to find the middle ground. But as you know, law is much more complicated and dense than that. So I'm still super passionate about it, but on my day-to-day, I prefer to do more techie stuff because I find it faster to move through and faster to evolve through in general. And right now I'm doing my MBA. There was a really good opportunity to do it part-time virtually, especially during the pandemic. So I kind of started earlier this year. And I've been doing a module at a time with a great cohort. And yeah, it's been super interesting, and it's helped me develop and evolve. Yeah.
Okay. Super cool. I'm interested because you studied marketing as your initial degree, and was there any tech in that degree? Was there anything that maybe gave you an inroad into tech? Tell us a bit about what that was like.
So the degree itself wasn't super tech-based, but there were ways that I ended up landing into in tech and learning about tech just in general. I think a lot of the degree had presentation aspects of it. It's very business focused. So sometimes you have to do a lot of finance, economics. There were a few tech-based modules, to make sure that you were proficient to go into the working world. Understanding tech, understanding the tools that you'd be using on a day-to-day, everyday basis, but in general, everything that you pursued tech-wise was something that you kind of did in your spare time. So one of the things that we did with my friends was we created a advertising society where we would do adverts for other societies or local businesses. And that meant that, we would make the ads from scratch. And like, there was a guy in our advertising society who would do the design for it, and you get familiar with that piece of technology, getting just familiar with just how to put an ad together on your own with very little resourcing. You kind of end up just dabbling in it a lot. And I think like most tech people, you find yourself drawn to those situations a lot throughout your life, and then you end up just getting closer and closer to the field that you really want to do. But tech really, really started in my first job outside of uni.
So your first job after university was Yahoo. Tell us how you secured that job after university.
Okay, cool. So my first job after university was like an agency called Cogent Elliott. And then I went on to Yahoo. Cogent Elliott was this advertising integrated agency where, as a graduate, you would do a stint in each department. So we did traditional media, and then we did digital advertising. And when I was doing digital advertising, I was just better at content management. I was more comfortable with working and helping to develop digital ads. It was just something that, out of all my rotations, I had a lot of comfortability in. But what it always felt like was I was facilitating people who were really, really good at their jobs, like the designers, the developers. I was facilitating them on how to put those elements together so that we could get a finished product to the client. And I wanted to be involved in making those things, and I wanted to be involved in problem solving and deciphering the code itself. So after that first role, I was like, this is not exactly what I want to do. Account management is not exactly what I want to do. I want to get more involved. But I didn't know how I wanted to get involved. So I took a year off and I traveled to China, where I spent a year and just taught and did research for companies like Nokia and Ericsson in my spare time. And in that, when I came back to the UK, and I was like, okay, I have to find this stable job, and but it has to be something that I love to do on a day-to-day basis, because account management wasn't really it. I will have to create a skills-based CV, and that's how I ended up at Yahoo. It was creating that skills-based CV that highlighted the skills that I wanted to be work on a day-to-day basis. And I was like, I want to do math. I'm really good with data and statistics. I like to solve problems that are quite human. So what do people like? How do people behave? How do people interact with each other? So a company called Brightroll actually was the company to hire me. And they got bought by Yahoo, and then that's how I ended up at Yahoo, if that makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense. I want to take a quick step back because I'm very intrigued by your year off. You said that you were doing account management, but you didn't feel like it was new, so you took a year off, which is obviously kind of, I think it's a very, I don't want to say brave, but it's a very, I guess, self-aware thing to do, to realize that I'm not in the right place. Let me take a step back and kind of figure this out. So I'd love to know about your thought process in doing that, but also you talked about doing research for companies like Nokia and Ericsson, and I'm interested in how you secured those opportunities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think like at university, you have this view of like what the working world is going to be. And you've got all these hopes and dreams of what comes out at the end of it. And even though I went to university, I was solely focused on making sure that you were prepared for what happens after uni. We had a placement program where I worked for a year for a company as a part of my studies. I still think that you can go into it thinking that you know what job you want because you studied that job. And you're dead set on doing that. But the reality is when you get into that role, you're like, okay, this is a little bit different from what I expected. So the things that I found that were different from what I expected was that it was very like people oriented and communications based. So like you're working with a lot of people and a lot of stakeholders on what their needs are and what they would like. But the way that I like to work was have long tail relationships with 1 or 2, 3 or 4 people. Mm. So account management, you could be working with someone for a day, or you could be working with someone like in that very long term basis. But it was very, very fast moving and fast changing. And like there was a lot of emphasis on expending a lot of social energy, which wasn't very natural to me. So that's kind of when I was like, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this year off, which I just basically heard about this program. The British Council kind of sends people abroad every single year, and they offer them jobs, and then you get paid for those roles. So it was kind of a program where I knew that I would have a steady income. I would get to teach, share my culture, and then I'd have a lot of free time to figure out what to do with the rest of my time. And like a lot of people would be like, oh, I'm going to learn Chinese really, really well. Other people would be became bloggers and writers, and they just pursued their extracurricular passions. But I was really interested in like, I made a community of friends who were in universities. So then I would have roles in those universities where I would like do a culture shock teaching session, or do help people with their CVs so that they can get into schools abroad. And then they knew that I had a marketing background, and as part of marketing, there's research to it. So they were like, we need researchers for Nokia and Siemens. So we did 1 or 2 programs with them whereby we were like designing the research for the phones that they were about to release to make sure that they were expat friendly, basically, which was a community that I was in whilst I was living in China. So it was really good to design that from end to end and actually do the testing in it. And it was great. But a lot of it came from just friendships and social connections.
Amazing. Okay, so you talked a bit about kind of your first few jobs, and you've had kind of some interesting roles over the years. So I'd just love you to tell us a bit about kind of the different roles you had before your current one, and just what made you kind of change roles, the things you enjoyed in the different roles, and kind of what you were optimizing for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's like a theme within all the roles that I've had throughout my career. and that it's programmatic or it is paid media. And the day-to-day of that kind of looks like you set up a campaign you set up a campaign for your digital adverts so that you can advertise your clients' products online. So that's the core of the job. And what I really loved about it was that you could get technical, but it was still those jobs where it was really collaborative at the core of it. So the technical aspects of it were like, to make a digital ad, it's half coding, half images. So you would like go in there and you would like build the different elements of an ad together. And sometimes the coding would be a little bit off. So you troubleshoot it, or you could go in and you would have to set up a campaign using an interface based on algorithmic logic. So you'd have to make sure that like you're taking into account, like, how do you think the algorithm is going to react to my setup? And how do I organize my setup to best advantage my campaign to deliver? So in all my jobs, they share that. And it's just been an evolution of my role in that. So first of all, it was me doing campaign delivery. And then it evolved to me helping create a portfolio of those campaigns for different clients. Then it became advising the clients on how to run their own campaigns. And then it evolved to me working client side, helping manage agencies do that process on our behalf. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to dig into some of the terminology you've used, because I think some of the people listening may not be as familiar with the ad space. So there's a couple of words that I'm going to pull out that people might want to know. So campaign, generally, campaign delivery, talks about paid media, and you talk about programmatic. So if you could break that down for our listeners, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, cool. So programmatic, it can happen in a number of different industries, but programmatic essentially means automation. But in this context, it means the automation of buying adverts. In the past, I think the way that we traditionally think of buying adverts is like, if I want to put a TV advert on TV, I will call up someone in a different office, we'll negotiate the times, the dates, and the rates, and then my advert will show based on the contract that we've agreed. Online, everybody's quite familiar that like there's adverts everywhere. So you're navigating and you're reading a newspaper, and you can come across an advert. It's one of the brilliant parts of the internet that allows it to be kind of democratic, because those advertisers help those publishers create content without having to charge the end user. And yeah, so that's the ecosystem of programmatic, and I hope I made that super clear. And I can jump into campaigns unless you have any other questions.
No, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So campaign management and campaign delivery, it doesn't matter what type of media you're doing, you're always going to be running a campaign of some sort. And I think Mad Men does a really good job of showing how, like, in the 50s, this is what a campaign would be, or so on and so forth. I think my first introduction to what a campaign was in the movie What Women Want. And they wanted to do a campaign for Nike for women. And that meant, like, what is our concept behind what we are trying to run, and who do we want to reach, the end customers, and how do we want to communicate our values to them. Digitally, a campaign is very much the same thing, but audiences look different. It's If someone is on a cooking site, they are the type of person who'd be into cooking. So that could be an audience group in itself. If we're running a cooking advert or a cooking campaign, we would want to reach out to audiences that were interested in that content. So digitally, it's making sure that we find those online audiences and where they dwell to show them relevant adverts about things that they might be interested in.
That's super cool. And I think that's a really interesting kind of observation of how the industry's changed, that before you had to kind of do quite, I guess, broad campaigns, but now you can be more hyper-focused and really meet people where they are. That's super cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Because like in the past, it used to be like if a TV show was airing that might skew towards teenagers, then you'd be like, okay, well, then let's do something more teen focused there. Or something that might be more feminine, let's skew towards that. But I think digital kind of doesn't make those assumptions as much because someone who might be interested in like cooking could be male or female, and all we're interested in is that they love cooking.
Yeah.
So you actually get to serve your advert to the people who are interested in it, rather than being like, this is a more feminine show, so therefore I'm going to put more feminine ads against it. And yeah.
Cool. Okay. So we'll move on into what you're currently doing, which is international user acquisition at Headspace. Can you just tell us a bit about your current role and what you do on a day-to-day basis? And maybe just start off with kind of explaining exactly what a user acquisition lead is and does.
Yeah. So on a day-to-day basis, it's working very closely with like the marketing department and the branding department to come up to come up with the digital execution of any campaign that kind of happens. So what that kind of looks like is once the creative concept has been decided, we work with digital partners like Facebook or TikTok or Snap to figure out how we want our ads to play out on their platforms and what cool things we can do digitally to amplify the message of that advert. So it's a lot of fun. It sounds cool when I say it because I think it's cool, but I think it's quite technical on a day-to-day basis. It's a lot of reading data, analyzing information, like large amounts of data to come to the conclusions that we do about how we want to run those digital campaigns.
Okay. It's super interesting. So yeah, you just mentioned just now that it is quite technical. Would you say it's creative? Is there like an even split between how creative it is and how technical it is?
Yes. So, okay, this is a perfect example. And like something that I love about the role is that you get these brilliant pieces of creative, but they may perform differently in different environments. So the technical bit about it is how do we prove that one advert is better than another? And the best way to do that is to run them both or three of them in the same environment and see how they are received and processed by the audiences that are watching them. So there's that creative element whereby you're dealing with creative assets and you're making sure that they suit the environment that we're trying to put them in. But there is that technical aspect where it's like, I'm going to run this test. I've got a hypothesis and I'm going to run this test and I'm going to see how it pans out. And then I'm going to optimize to the best version of that test. So it's like very scientific and very numeracy based because you need to reach statistical significance for it to be valid, or you need to run it for a long enough time for it to be valid. So there's a lot of those considerations in play when you're doing something like that. And sometimes like the system might have data indicators, but you're very human. So you can jump in and be like, okay, I know that the data is telling us that this is what will happen when we run this campaign. But I'm a human being, and this is how I'm viewing it, and these are things that we need to watch out for, or these are things that would be really cool from a humanistic perspective. So it's one of those jobs that's just right in the middle, and it's really cool. It's not too technical, but it definitely makes sure that like everything is verified by data and tech.
Okay, and just on that note, what would you say you enjoy or like most about your job?
So it's funny because I ran away from a role that required relationship management into a role where relationship management was super integral to everything. And I think that's one of the things about being in technical roles, is that you have to explain your job or your role to people who might not understand what you're talking about. And you have to make sure that the nuances of how you deal with tech and how you deal with data are taken into account. So it's become my favorite part of my job, but mainly because I see communication as an opportunity for education and an opportunity to teach people what I love about my role. So it's like I just found out like super ironic that like I was like, oh, I'm not good at relationships and I'm not good at this stuff, so I'm gonna like go over here, and that's exactly where I ended.
Super cool. Can I take a step back? I don't think we covered it, but you've had a range of roles in a range of companies. You were at Yahoo, you've been at PayPal, and Headspace is kind of a new, I wouldn't say startup, but it's a kind of a new innovative company in the tech space. What attracted you to the company?
I think the fact that it was a startup in general, and the fact that because startup environments are super different from agency environments, and those are super different from tech environments. So in a more established company, there's a lot more processes established, and there's a lot more specialization in each role. So you get super refined onto exactly what you're doing. But when you're in a startup environment, there aren't as many people. So you have to kind of spread yourself and learn a lot more about the wider ecosystem. Just get yourself into different roles and wear different hats as you do it. So in general, I was interested in joining a startup for that reason. Headspace was a particular choice for me because of just the culture and the outlook of the company in terms of what it wanted to do in the world and the impact that it wanted to have. Meditation and wellness is something that is super important in how we navigate our day-to-day lives. So I thought that this was a company that would really have an impact on people's lives.
What would your advice be for someone who is kind of currently outside of tech and thinking, okay, this sounds super cool, I want to find my place? Yeah, what would your advice be to them?
Okay. I think sometimes it may feel like that there's no way in a role like tech, just because it seems like everybody's quite proficient and technical, and there's like, it's almost like it's its own language sometimes. And when I started, there were 101 acronyms that I had to like overcome, and I was always the greenest person in the room. But as I mentioned before, the skills-based CV that I kind of made, it's kind of different to normal CVs in terms of that instead of it being organized based on my past experience, it's organized based on the skills that I have that are transferable, that would be valuable in any organization. So I highlighted that I had I had an affinity for maths and technical things, and then I said I talked about the tech-based things and the digital-based things that I had done. So helping start the advertising society. My comfortability with new technology, all of those kinds of things, just to really emphasize that I had an affinity for those things and I taught. So there are different ways that you can be self-taught before you kind of enter the industry as well. So advice that I would give is like, check out Google. Google has like an academy that is free for all to kind of learn different aspects of different tech. And you don't need it, but if you take one of those courses and you self-teach, it'll look really good on your CV. And Microsoft will have one. There are different companies that just kind of offer introductory courses in different aspects of tech that you might be interested in. And that's one way to kind of just show that you have the initiative and the drive to pursue your passions and that you're serious about it as well. But a skills-based CV is definitely how I got into it in a more serious way. And then I think general advice within the industry is just that, like, everything is hard. Learning is just one of those things that is just it creates so much internal tension because you want to get it right and you want to be good at something almost instantly. It's kind of how we've been trained to think because of TV and the media. But learning is such a long process, and it's something that you have to keep chipping away at, and it's something that, like, even now where I don't have to be as involved in the management of the individual campaigns at a super granular technical level, I still try and go in there and make sure that I'm familiar with the tech that we're using so that I can understand what I'm asking people to do for me, and what challenges they face on a day-to-day basis. So it's like, just keep the thing that's always given me encouragement is just that, like, I'm just here to learn, and like that's just always going to be a part of my job. And I just love learning. So at least there's that.
No, I think that's so key. I think any job you have to have a learning mindset, but in tech in particular, because things are always changing and developing. You can't come into the role and be like, I've done X, Y, Z for 10 years and I know all the things. So now you have to be like, okay, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to continue learning. So yeah, that's definitely
exactly. Yeah, and it just feels so like hard sometimes because everybody always feels like they're light years ahead of you, but nope. Just
just to pick up what you just said, I definitely agree as well. I definitely feel like learning is crucial to development and continuously building on where you've come from, to be honest. But I have a question, and I don't know if it's different from what you said, but what would you say takes for you to be successful in your area of work?
Yeah. I'm still working on that. So this is what it's taken to be successful so far. I think tech, I think in general, really, it's just being as human as possible with the people that you work with. And I think thinking about the person behind the person that you're asking or that you're delivering information to or you're trying to support. So like if I'm doing a project for my manager, they're doing it because they're going to present it to someone else and taking that perspective into consideration as you do your role. And it's tiring. It's definitely a tiring process to be that considerate and to be that forward thinking, like, because sometimes you just want to come in and just do your job on a day-to-day basis. But I think having the vision to see beyond the person that you're helping and then who's behind them as well, to see their bigger picture is also super crucial. And the other direction of that is I'm asking someone to do something for me, understanding the challenges that they're going through. And then if they have to then pass that information on, what can I do up front to make sure that the person that I'm dealing with directly has everything that they need to then do their job with the next person really, really well. So I think initially when I was starting, I was like, oh, I'm the lowest person in the cog. I have no influence and I have no impact in that big a way, but you really do. And it shows in the quality of your work when you take those considerations into play. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, excellent advice. Okay, I'd love to kind of take a step back and think about. I hate to use the word balance, but how you manage your personal and professional life. I think everyone I know in tech at this time of year, at least, is exhausted and almost always exhausted. Like I said, it's hard work across the board. So I'm wondering about kind of how you manage, and the things you do to kind of as an outlet as well.
Yeah. I think I'm one of those people who does 100 things at a time. So like right now I'm doing work and then I'm studying. And in a past life, I would have done that and volunteered and also committed to everything that my friends asked me to do. And I think in my late 20s and my 30s now, I'm actually saying no to some stuff. It really can create enough space for you to do one or two things really, really well. So right now, even though I'm doing my MBA and I'm working, I've tried to make sure that those are the two big focuses and I'm not too hard on myself in other aspects of my life. So I love to run, but I make sure that when I don't run as much as I would like to, I'm still appreciative of the fact that I get to run, and I don't put pressure on myself to make sure that this is something that I have to do and I have to achieve it and I have to hit these milestones because I've already got two things that demand that kind of thing from me. And like you said, this time of year is crazy for people in tech and especially for people in advertising. So in my MBA, I was like, I'm going to have to take this module and defer it. I've done it every module up until this point, but I want to make sure that this season, I know that work is going to demand a lot more from me. So I need to make space for that. So I reached out to my school and they were super accommodating and they were like, yeah, that completely makes sense. Definitely take that time and that break. And then in terms of finding balance in everything else, I think just historically, like it's something that I never did, but I know that you should do, is that if you are finding something stressful and difficult, it's okay to put it down for a while. I'm not good at this, so I'm not going to even, I just know that it's something that you should do. Like you should stop and ask and talk to people around you and ask for that space to be able to just put it down for a while, have someone else look at it, and then come back to it when you have the capacity to deal with it. But it's so hard to do, especially when you're a woman, and especially when you're in tech and feel like that you're an underrepresented person in that space, if that makes sense. Yeah.
But I think it's so key, and I just want to kind of emphasize what you were saying, to have that level of self-awareness to say, I call it almost predicting burnout. So before you get to the point where everything is on top of you, look at what you're doing and say, okay, what thing can I put down for a while and come back to later so that I can kind of have the headspace to do my best work in these other areas. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Definitely. And like, I'm still trying to figure out how do I predict that burnout, that burnout level. And I think documenting and reflecting on your day and yourself is a key part of it, but it's also super hard to do. So I'm trying to get that into like my routine. And even if it's like, okay, I hit the point of burnout, looking back at what caused you to get to that point will help you in the next one. So.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our conversation today, but I'm super keen to really understand, like, what does the future look like for you? What are your next steps? Like, do you have any projects or any areas you want to venture into? Tell us all.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been trying to figure out what I want out of life long term. And I think one thing that really makes me happy is being of service and being like volunteering in general. So I think that's a space that I want to enter in and see how I can have a bigger impact in, especially with the skills that I've had and I've honed in my work career. I think they could be helpful for businesses that are trying to take off and trying to expand. So, like in the last couple of years, it's I've always just been trying to make sure that, like, if there's an opportunity to help up and coming charities or startups, just in general, socially conscious startups, with advertising, consultation or direction, or actually doing some of their campaigns for them. I've gotten involved in that way, but I want that to grow and I want that to become something that's a fixture in what I do. Because I think, like, in the past, people used to think like, oh, you just have one job, but like, I think you can have your normal core job and then like build this other side of me that's also working towards that other purpose that's super important in my life. And I just want to continue to learn as best I can so that I can become a better leader, continue to shape change within the industry, within my specific profession.
Amazing. So cool. Okay, well, we're drawing to the end, and we just want to say thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. It's been so good speaking with you. Are there any kind of final messages you have for people, and where can people find you online?
Well, you can find me online if you search my first name and second name, so Fadzai, Angelina. And it's just mostly LinkedIn, to be honest. And then just in terms of the future, I think like there's just such room within tech for us to kind of enter and like influence how products are. So don't hesitate in getting into the industry. There's so many roles and there's just so much opportunity to really thrive and to create the kind of life that you want out of it. So I just really just get in the game. That's all I really recommend to people.
Amazing, thank you. One last words, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode of A Seat at the Tech Table. You can connect with us on our social media platforms. Just search @SistersInTech on Twitter and Instagram, and check out our website www.sistersin.tech to see what we've got going on. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, and we'll bring you the next episode soon.